Imagine fighting a war for 20 years, losing over 58,000 of your soldiers, spending billions of dollars, and still losing. That's exactly what happened to America in the Vietnam War. But here's the craziest part. This devastating conflict, which changed the world, started with good people trying to do the right thing. So how did it all go so tragically wrong? Stick around, because this story has more plot twists than your favorite movie. Our story begins way back in 1858, when France took control of Vietnam. The French claimed they were bringing civilization, building roads, bridges, and schools. But for the Vietnamese people, they weren't buying it. They wanted their country back, just as they had fought off Chinese invaders for centuries before. Fast forward to 1919. World War I has just ended. In France, a young Vietnamese nationalist, who would later be known as Ho Chi Minh, drafts a petition. He hopes to give it to American President Woodrow Wilson, who was championing freedom for colonized nations. Ho Chi Minh simply asked for help to make Vietnam independent, but his petition probably never even reached the president's desk. Feeling let down, Ho Chi Minh travels the world and discovers the writings of communist leader Vladimir Lenin. He thinks, hey, if communism is against colonialism, maybe that's the answer. And just like that, the future leader of Vietnam becomes a communist, not because he loved the ideology, but because he loved Vietnamese independence even more. Then, World War II flips the board. Germany conquers France, and Japan invades Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh sees his chance. He secretly returns home and creates a fighting force called the Viet Minh, essentially Vietnam's independence army. And here's where it gets interesting. America actually helps him. They airdrop weapons and advisors to the Viet Minh to fight their common enemy, the Japanese. Ho Chi Minh is thrilled. He even calls his soldiers the Viet American Army and praises the United States as a champion of democracy. He truly believes that after the war, America will support a free and independent Vietnam. When Japan surrenders in 1945, Ho Chi Minh stands before a massive crowd in Hanoi and declares Vietnam independent. The future looks bright. But then, President Franklin Roosevelt dies, and his successor, Harry Truman, faces a brand new threat: the Cold War. The world is now split in two. The Soviet Union is spreading communism across Eastern Europe, and America is determined to stop it. France, America's ally, delivers an ultimatum. If you help our colonies become independent, we might have to cozy up to the Soviets. America panics. They make a fateful choice: support France in keeping its colony, rather than support Vietnam in becoming free. For the next 7 years, the French fight the Viet Minh, bankrolled by American money and armed with American weapons. But the Vietnamese fighters are masters of their homeland. They use guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, and sabotage. The French army, thousands of miles from home, grows exhausted and demoralized. It all comes to a head in 1954 at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. The French build a massive, heavily fortified base in a valley, convinced they can lure the Viet Minh into a decisive battle and crush them, but they underestimate their enemy. 50,000 Vietnamese soldiers with unbelievable efforts haul heavy artillery up the surrounding mountains and completely encircled the French. After 55 days of brutal, non-stop fighting, the French surrender. After nearly a century, their colonial rule is over. This incredible victory teaches the Vietnamese a crucial lesson. A determined nation can fight a superpower and win. Peace talks in Geneva split Vietnam in two, right at the 17th parallel. A demilitarized zone, or DMZ, separates the North from the South. People are given 300 days to choose which side to live on. Fearing communist rule, about 900,000 people, many of them Catholics, flee to the South. The South becomes the Republic of Vietnam, with its capital in Saigon. The North becomes a communist state under Ho Chi Minh, with its capital in Hanoi. But many people in the South still dream of a unified Vietnam. They form an opposition group called the National Liberation Front. The Americans give their fighters a nickname, the Viet Cong, which roughly translates to Vietnamese communist traitors. Meanwhile, in America, John F. Kennedy becomes president. He's pressured from all sides. You can't let Vietnam fall to communism. The domino theory is the big fear. If one country falls, its neighbors will topple like dominoes. Kennedy refuses to send in ground troops, but he dramatically increases American involvement. He sends military advisors, helicopters, and advanced weapons. He also authorizes the use of Agent Orange, a toxic chemical designed to destroy jungle cover and crops. Then, in August 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin incident happens. An American destroyer reports being attacked by North Vietnamese patrol boats. President Lyndon Johnson wants to retaliate, but he needs a stronger justification. A couple of days later, the ship reports a second attack. But did it actually happen? The sailors themselves weren't sure. They detected strange signals on their sonar, but it might have just been bad weather. But President Johnson uses this probable second attack to go to Congress. He gets a resolution passed that gives him the authority to send troops to Vietnam. The entire war is about to escalate based on something that likely never even happened. The Viet Cong continues to attack American air bases. In response, Johnson launches Operation Rolling Thunder in March 1965, a massive bombing campaign against North Vietnam. And then he does what Kennedy wouldn't. He sends in the first American ground combat troops. First thousands, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of young American soldiers arrive in Vietnam. But here's the secret that only came out years later. Thanks to the Pentagon Papers, the war wasn't really about stopping communism anymore. It was about avoiding national embarrassment. America couldn't afford to look weak on the world stage. For American soldiers, the war was an impossible situation. The enemy wasn't a uniformed army they could easily identify. They used a vast network of underground tunnels and hid among the civilian population. The jungle was a nightmare so thick it could take an hour to move 100 feet. They faced leeches, venomous snakes, diseases, and deadly booby traps. To make matters worse, their standard-issue M16 rifles often jammed in the middle of firefights. American forces would fight heroically to capture a hill or a village, only to abandon it days later. Then, the Viet Cong would just move right back in. It was a war of attrition, with no front lines and no clear path to victory. All the while, back home, the government kept telling the public, "Don't worry, we're winning. Victory is just around the corner." Then came the Tet Offensive in 1968, on the Vietnamese New Year, or Tet, a day that was supposed to be a truce. 84,000 Viet Cong and North Vietnamese soldiers launched a coordinated surprise attack on over 100 cities and towns across South Vietnam. Militarily, it was a disaster for them. American and South Vietnamese forces fought back hard, and the Viet Cong was nearly wiped out. But psychologically, it was a turning point for Americans, who had been told for years the enemy was on the ropes, now watched on their TVs as the US Embassy in Saigon was under siege. The trust between the people and their government was shattered. Anti-war protests erupted across the country. President Johnson, his credibility destroyed, announced he would not run for re-election. The nation was further rocked by the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy. America was tearing itself apart. Richard Nixon becomes president, promising peace with honor. He begins a policy called Vietnamization, slowly pulling American troops out and training the South Vietnamese to fight their own war. But secretly, he had sabotaged peace talks before the election to help himself win, and he even expanded the war by bombing neighboring Cambodia. Finally, after years of grueling fighting and intense Christmas bombings of Hanoi in 1972, a peace agreement is signed. In 1973, the last American combat troops leave Vietnam. 2 years later, North Vietnam launches a final invasion and conquers the South. On April 30th, 1975, Saigon falls after 30 years of war and the loss of over 2 million Vietnamese and 58,000 American lives. Vietnam is finally united under communist rule. The Vietnam War was a brutal lesson. It showed that even the most powerful country on earth couldn't win a war when the people they were fighting are defending their own homeland with unwavering resolve. It divided America more than any event since its Civil War and left a deep scar of mistrust in government that lasts to this day. The soldiers who fought served with incredible bravery and honor. The tragedy is that they were sent by politicians to fight a war that, as the government's own secret documents later admitted, they knew couldn't be won. If you learned something new today, please hit that like button and subscribe for more complex history, explained simply, and let me know in the comments what piece of history you did like us to break down next. Thanks for watching.